My best friend was left at the altar. So I stepped forward and said, "I'll marry her." The church fell silent the moment the doors opened for the bride, but the silence became unbearable when everyone realized the groom was missing. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the empty altar, where a single white rose lay abandoned beside the wedding rings. My best friend, Emma, stood halfway down the aisle in her wedding dress, staring at the empty place where the man she loved was supposed to be. Then her phone slipped from her trembling fingers, and she whispered that he had left her a message saying he had changed his mind. She didn't cry at first. Somehow, that made it worse. She simply stood there as if her entire future had disappeared in front of everyone she knew. And before I could think about what I was doing, I stood up from the third row, walked toward the altar, and said the words that changed both our lives forever: "If you need someone to stand beside you, Emma, I will. I'll marry you. If you believe kindness can give someone a second chance when their world falls apart, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories about kindness, friendship, and unexpected second chances." I had known Emma for 12 years. We met in college when she accidentally spilled coffee across my only copy of an important exam guide. Instead of getting angry, I laughed, and somehow that ruined her plan to avoid me forever. From that day forward, we became inseparable. We studied together, survived terrible jobs together, celebrated birthdays together, and held each other through the kind of heartbreaks that make you question whether happiness is even real. Emma was the person who knew every version of me, including the insecure one I never showed anyone else. She knew about my father's death, my failed business, my fear of never becoming successful, and the quiet loneliness I carried even when surrounded by people. But there was one thing we had never talked about seriously: the strange possibility that maybe we were more than friends. Emma had fallen in love with Daniel 2 years earlier. I had watched her become softer around him, watched her smile at her phone when his messages arrived, watched her make plans for a future that didn't include me. And because I loved her as my best friend, I convinced myself that wanting anything more would be selfish. So when she announced her engagement, I smiled, hugged her, and told her I was happy for her. Even when something inside me quietly broke, I buried it beneath congratulations. The wedding morning had begun beautifully. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, flowers filled the church with a sweet fragrance, and Emma looked like someone who had stepped out of a dream. Before the ceremony, she found me standing near the back hallway and hugged me so tightly that for a moment neither of us spoke. She told me she was terrified, not because she doubted Daniel, but because happiness sometimes frightened her. She said she had spent so much of her life expecting something to go wrong that she didn't know how to trust something good. I told her that she deserved happiness and that no matter what happened, would always be there. I meant it as a promise between friends. I didn't realize how soon I would have to prove it. 20 minutes later, the wedding coordinator discovered that Daniel wasn't answering his phone. His best man was missing too. Someone said his car wasn't outside. Then Emma received a message. Daniel had written that he was sorry, but he couldn't go through with the wedding. He said he had met someone else and realized he was making a mistake. Those words destroyed her. People began whispering. Relatives stared at one another. Someone's aunt started crying. Emma's mother looked as if she might collapse. But Emma remained frozen in the aisle, surrounded by hundreds of people and completely alone. That's when I stood. I don't remember walking toward her. I only remember the sound of my shoes against the church floor and the way every face turned toward me. When I reached her, I took her hand. It was cold and shaking. I looked at the empty altar, then back at her, and told her that she didn't have to walk away from the day believing she had been abandoned by everyone. I said I would marry her. The church erupted into whispers. Emma stared at me as if I had lost my mind. Her mother tried to pull me aside. Her friends looked shocked. Even the priest hesitated. Everyone thought I was acting out of pity, desperation, or some reckless attempt to save a ruined wedding. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't trying to replace Daniel. I was trying to remind Emma that one man's decision didn't determine her worth. The priest eventually asked Emma whether she wanted to leave. She looked at me, tears finally running down her face, and said she didn't know what she wanted. I told her that was enough. She didn't have to decide anything that day. So the wedding was cancelled. There was no ceremony. No vows. No marriage license. No magical transformation. Just two best friends sitting on the church steps while guests slowly left. That night, Emma came to my apartment still wearing part of her wedding makeup. She sat on the kitchen floor and cried until she couldn't breathe properly. I didn't tell her everything would be okay because I knew it wouldn't be okay for a while. Instead, I sat beside her and stayed. For the next several weeks, Emma disappeared into herself. She stopped answering messages, stopped going to work, and refused to see anyone connected to the wedding. I brought groceries to her apartment. I helped return gifts. I packed away the decorations. I even helped her cancel the honeymoon. But eventually, my kindness became complicated. People began asking whether I had always loved her. The answer was yes. I just hadn't admitted it to myself until the day I saw her standing alone at the altar. Emma eventually noticed the way I looked at her. One evening, while we were sitting on her balcony, she asked me why I had offered to marry her. I told her the truth. I said I had loved her quietly for years, but I never wanted to steal her happiness. I had watched her choose Daniel, and I had accepted that friendship might be the only place I belonged in her life. She cried again, but this time the tears were different. She said she had always wondered why every relationship she had felt incomplete. She admitted that whenever something wonderful happened, I was the first person she wanted to tell. Whenever she was scared, she wanted me nearby. Whenever she imagined growing old, somehow I was always part of the picture, even when she was dating someone else. But she was afraid. She didn't know whether she loved me or simply loved the safety I represented. That honesty hurt, but I told her I could wait. Not forever. Not as a backup plan. But long enough for her to discover what she truly wanted. Months passed. Emma rebuilt her life slowly. She returned to work. She started laughing again. She stopped blaming herself for Daniel's betrayal. And I learned something important too: loving someone doesn't mean demanding that they choose you. Sometimes real love means giving someone enough freedom to choose without pressure. Then, almost a year after the wedding that never happened, Emma asked me to meet her at the same church. When I arrived, she was standing near the altar. There were no flowers. No guests. No wedding dress. Just Emma. She told me she had spent the past year trying to understand the difference between being rescued and being loved. She said the day I offered to marry her, she had thought I was saving her from humiliation. But she eventually realized something. I hadn't saved her. I had simply refused to let her believe she was worthless. She told me that Daniel had abandoned her because he was afraid of choosing the wrong future. I had stayed because I was willing to let her choose her own. Then she took my hand. She said she didn't want to marry me because she needed someone after Daniel. She wanted to marry me because, after losing everything she thought she wanted, she finally understood who had been standing beside her all along. I cried. I couldn't help it. For years, I had imagined telling Emma how I felt. I had imagined romantic dinners, perfect timing, beautiful words. I never imagined it would happen after a broken wedding, a shattered heart, and a year of learning that love couldn't be forced. Our wedding was small. There were no extravagant decorations. No hundreds of guests. Just family, a few close friends, and the people who had watched us grow from college students into two adults who finally understood what they meant to each other. When Emma walked toward me, she wasn't the frightened bride from that first wedding. She was smiling. And when she reached me, she didn't look toward an empty altar. She looked at me. Years later, people still asked about the day I stood up and said I would marry my best friend. They thought that was the moment our love story began. It wasn't. Our love story began much earlier, in small moments neither of us recognized. It lived in late-night conversations, grocery runs, terrible jokes, hospital waiting rooms, birthday surprises, and quiet afternoons when neither of us needed to say anything. The day I stepped forward wasn't the beginning. It was simply the moment I finally stopped pretending that my heart didn't already belong to her. And Emma taught me something I will never forget: sometimes the person who breaks your heart isn't the person who determines your future. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak becomes the doorway to a life you never knew was waiting for you. So if this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of kindness can remind a broken person that they are still worthy of love. And before you go, leave a comment saying, "Love deserves a second chance," if you believe that true love isn't about being someone's first choice when everything is easy. It's about choosing each other freely, honestly, and wholeheartedly when life has given you every reason to give up. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories don't begin with a perfect wedding. Sometimes they begin when someone is left standing alone. And another person quietly decides not to let them face the darkness alone.